The tension inside the CNN debate studio was thick enough to slice with a blade. Under the scorching glow of stage lights, two of the most talked about figures in American politics sat across from one another, preparing for a televised clash that would shock the nation to its core. On one side sat Karoline Leavitt, 27 years old, blonde, poised, and deadly in debate. Once the youngest ever White House press secretary under Donald Trump, now a congressional candidate with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Dressed in her trademark navy blazer, she radiated confidence. Her eyes sparkled with ambition. She had come to fight. Across from her sat Morgan Freeman, not the Hollywood icon people thought they knew, but the real man beneath the legend. A decorated military veteran, former federal prosecutor, national security strategist, a man who had moved in silence through some of the world's loudest storms. Seated calmly under those blinding lights, he represented a different vision of American strength, earned, not inherited. What happened in the next 30 seconds would be replayed across every screen in America, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real and it changed everything. "Mr. Freeman," Leavitt began, her tone dripping with polite venom, "maybe it's time you stopped pretending to understand American values and went back to wherever you came from." The words didn't just land, they detonated. Gasps erupted across the studio. Anderson Cooper froze mid-breath. Viewers across the country leaned in. Social media lit up in real time, calling it the most openly racist statement ever made by a major political candidate on live television. But Morgan didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't blink. He just looked at her with the kind of stillness that makes people uncomfortable, the kind of quiet that comes from a man who has nothing left to prove. Because what he said next didn't just dismantle Leavitt's career, it exposed a truth about America that couldn't be ignored any longer. Before we go deeper, don't forget to like and subscribe, because what you're about to witness isn't just politics, it's a reckoning. This moment wasn't about policy. It wasn't about red versus blue. This was about what America is and who gets to claim it. One career would shatter, one would ascend, and the whole country would be forced to confront the question, what does it really mean to be American? To understand how we got here, you need to understand who these two people really are and what they represent. Karoline Leavitt's rise was meteoric. Raised in a working-class Catholic family in New Hampshire, she embodied small-town values and conservative grit. After graduating from St. Anselm College, she landed a position on Trump's communications team at just 24. Bold, relentless, and fiercely loyal, she quickly became a conservative media darling. Trump didn't just trust her, he relied on her. When things got ugly in the press room, Karoline was the one who held the line. But her rise came with criticism. Some called her Trump's mouthpiece. Others saw her as dangerously divisive. Still, to her supporters, she was the future of the movement. Youthful, fearless, and unapologetically America first. Her congressional campaign wasn't just about policy, it was about legacy, about carrying Trump's torch into the next generation. Morgan Freeman's path couldn't have been more different. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, to working-class parents, a school teacher and a factory worker, he didn't grow up with connections. He grew up with discipline. He enlisted, he served, he led, he bled. After leaving the military, Morgan studied law, then joined the Department of Justice. He became a prosecutor, targeting drug cartels and domestic terror cells. He served in places that never made the headlines. He sat in rooms where split-second decisions meant life or death. And he did it all without fanfare, because real patriots don't need applause. When Trump took office, Morgan was tapped for high-level national security roles, not because he was loud, but because he delivered. Efficient, loyal, relentless. He exposed threats. He dismantled networks. He did what needed to be done when the cameras were off. Trump trusted him so much, he nominated Morgan to lead the FBI. The pushback was instant. Too loyal, they said. Too independent. Too powerful. But the real problem, to some, was Morgan's skin color and background, which didn't fit their mold of what a leader should look like. His record was impeccable, but his identity made him a target. And on that stage, Leavitt made the same mistake others had made before her. She underestimated the man across from her, and she was about to pay the price. But across from her sat something she couldn't categorize, something that challenged her entire worldview. Morgan Freeman didn't come from privilege. He didn't inherit a legacy. He built one. And he didn't just represent the American dream. He embodied it. He was living proof that patriotism isn't measured in generations but in sacrifice, that love of country isn't inherited, it's earned in uniform, in courtrooms, in choices made when no one is watching. The debate was supposed to focus on national security. Safe ground. Leavitt had handled press during international crises under Trump. Morgan had made the actual calls that kept people alive during those crises. While Leavitt defended policies in press rooms, Morgan wrote them behind classified doors. As the cameras rolled, the night began quietly enough. Anderson Cooper welcomed the candidates and opened with questions on border policy. For the first 20 minutes, it was standard fare. Talking points, party lines. Leavitt went first. "We need leaders who understand America must come first," she said confidently. "Our borders are open, our laws are ignored, and Americans are already paying the price." Then came Morgan, calm, steady. "I've spent decades identifying real threats to this country. Terror networks, drug operations, foreign interference. We don't protect America by stoking fear. We protect it by facing facts." His voice wasn't flashy, but it carried weight. Then the air shifted. Cooper asked about the Trump administration's immigration policies, and Leavitt pounced. "We need people in government," she said, her eyes narrowing toward Morgan, "who truly understand American values, people whose loyalty is never in question." A few audience members stiffened. Morgan didn't react. Not yet. He responded coolly. "I think my record speaks for itself. I've put terrorists behind bars. I've saved lives. I've bled for this country. If that's not loyalty, I don't know what is." But Leavitt wasn't backing off. She had come with a plan, and she was sticking to it, no matter how deep she had to dig. "It's easy to say you're loyal," she snapped, "but real Americans don't have to prove it. It's in their blood." That phrase landed like a gunshot. Real Americans. The studio fell quiet. Anderson Cooper shifted in his chair. In the control room, CNN producers were wide-eyed. Social media exploded. Hashtag real Americans and hashtag immigrant pride began trending within seconds. Morgan's jaw tensed, but only for a moment. "Miss Leavitt," he said evenly, "are you suggesting that American citizenship is determined by ancestry rather than values, duty, or sacrifice?" Leavitt didn't backpedal. She doubled down. "I'm saying," she said, her voice sharp, "some of us feel America in our bones. Others have to learn it from books." Murmurs rippled through the audience. A woman in the front row put her hand to her mouth. One of the camera operators whispered, "Damn," without realizing his mic was live. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was personal, and it was far from over. Karoline Leavitt had crossed a line, and Morgan Freeman was about to show America exactly how a real patriot responds. She had made her choice, and it was clear Leavitt wasn't just debating policy anymore. She was going after Morgan Freeman's very right to claim the flag he had spent his life defending. "Mr. Freeman talks a good game about American values," she said, her voice steady but cutting. "But when it really counts, where do his loyalties lie? When he looks in the mirror, does he see an American or something else?" The studio went still, like the air being sucked out of a room. This wasn't political theater anymore. It was personal, a full-scale assault on identity, belonging, and patriotism. Anderson Cooper looked stunned, his mouth slightly open, unsure whether to step in or let history unfold. In the control room, CNN producers were frozen, eyes darting to one another, silently asking, "Are we really letting this go live?" Viewers at home felt their hearts sink, especially those who had lived it. Immigrant families, military vets, first-generation Americans. They had heard this before, that subtle, sharp-edged suggestion that no matter how much you give to this country, it's never enough if you weren't born into the right name, the right neighborhood, the right lineage. But Morgan didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at her with the same quiet, controlled gaze that had once made cartel bosses confess in steel interrogation rooms. The kind of gaze that said, "You've already lost." "Miss Leavitt," he said softly, "you should be very careful about the road you're going down." She didn't stop. Maybe she didn't understand the warning, or maybe she didn't care. Mr. Freeman, you've served this country, and I respect that, she continued. But there's a difference between serving America and understanding it. Some of us were born with that understanding. Others, she paused, dramatic, deliberate. Others will always be trying to prove they belong. The insult was sharp but surgical. She had said it with a smile, but no one missed the blade behind the words. Morgan nodded slowly, as if this was the moment he had been expecting all along. I see, he said, still calm. So you believe American identity is inherited, that it lives in the bloodline, not the actions. That's an interesting position for someone who claims to support the Constitution. Leavitt's voice tightened. I believe America should be led by Americans who don't need to prove their loyalty because it's never been in doubt. The room was restless now. A few claps, some murmurs, some shaking heads. Anderson Cooper was getting frantic signals in his earpiece. CNN execs were torn, cut to commercial or let this roll because something massive was building. And then Morgan did something nobody expected. He smiled, not with smugness, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a man holding a full house while his opponent plays checkers. Miss Leavitt, he said, voice deepening into something that sounded like a verdict. Since we're talking about who really belongs in America, let me tell you a story. She blinked just once. Her smile wavered. It's about my family, Morgan continued, and about yours. And by the time I'm finished, everyone watching will know exactly who has the right to question whose loyalty in this country. She shifted in her seat, the first crack. You see, Bus, Morgan said, his voice now stronger, clearer, unshakable. I spent years in the intelligence community. I know how to find information, how to verify it. So before I came here tonight, I did some research on you. A hush dropped over the audience. One of the camera operators stopped panning. The crew froze. Leavitt's face paled. I don't know what you think you found, she said, but the confidence was gone. Her tone betrayed her. Oh, I think you do, Morgan replied, his smile deepening. But don't worry, I'm going to share it with everyone. And then he leaned forward, hands folded, eyes locked on hers, as the studio lights found his face and silence filled the room. What Morgan was about to say next wouldn't just turn the debate, it would become one of the most unforgettable political moments in American history. The confidence Karoline Leavitt had worn like armor just moments earlier was now cracking, visible, real. She had assumed Morgan Freeman would absorb her blows with dignity and let them pass. She didn't expect him to come armed with facts. You see, Morgan said, voice measured but gaining strength, when you've worked in intelligence as long as I have, you learn a simple rule. Trust but verify. So when I found out I'd be debating Miss Leavitt tonight, I did what any good investigator would do. I did my homework. He reached calmly into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. This is all public record, he continued. Anyone can look it up, but I suspect most Americans don't actually know the truth about the Leavitt family story. Cameras zoomed in. The audience held its breath. In the CNN control room, producers were scrambling, but no one dared cut to the commercial. The ratings were soaring, and the country was watching. Let's start with mine, Morgan said, opening the folder with precision. My parents were born in the South, raised in a time when America didn't always see them as equal. My father worked 3 months. Factory worker, delivery man, night watchman. My mother was a school teacher, shaping young minds despite the odds. They didn't come here for favors. They didn't expect handouts. They believed in one thing, that if they worked hard and followed the rules, they could give their son a better life. His voice remained steady, but his eyes shone with a deeper fire. My father never took welfare, never asked for special treatment, never believed America owed him anything. He earned every cent, every opportunity, and he used it to send me to school with money made by his own hands. The room was dead silent. Even Leavitt's most vocal supporters were still. When I was old enough to serve, Morgan continued, I didn't hesitate. I joined the military. I became a prosecutor. I went undercover to dismantle drug cartels. I helped take down terror cells. I've been shot at, threatened, hunted. I've spent nights in foreign countries where being found would have meant death. He paused, letting the weight of that history settle in the room. All of it for one purpose: to protect American lives. He turned his gaze back toward the camera now, toward the millions watching from living rooms and phones and news feeds. So when Miss Leavitt tells me to go back, she's not just talking to me. She's talking to every American family who's ever worked, sacrificed, and believed in this country. Applause rippled through the crowd, but Morgan raised a hand. "I'm not done," he said, "because the most revealing story here isn't mine. It's hers." Leavitt flinched. Morgan opened the folder wider and pulled out several documents. Miss Leavitt loves to talk about being a real American. She's built her whole campaign on this image: someone who represents authentic American values. But according to public records, he held up the first page, her family immigrated to America in 1892. That's right, Karoline Leavitt is a third-generation immigrant, just like millions of others. The crowd began to murmur, but Morgan wasn't finished. And here's where it gets poetic. His voice sharpened, precise, surgical. Leavitt's family didn't come from war. They weren't fleeing persecution. They came from Canada. A few gasps, some laughter. Leavitt's expression was locked in place, but the color had drained from her face. "That's right," Morgan said. "The woman who told me to go back is herself the descendant of Canadian immigrants who came to America for work." But Morgan had one more card to play. "Oh, and it gets better," he said, clearly now in full command of the room. Her great-grandfather, Thomas Leavitt, was denied entry to the United States twice. Denied because immigration officials doubted whether he could support himself. Leavitt tried to interrupt. "This is absurd. You can't—" "Oh, but I can," Morgan cut her off, calm but final, "because according to the same records, your great-grandfather had no money, no job prospects, no guarantees." He looked directly at the camera. In other words, Thomas Leavitt was exactly the kind of person his great-granddaughter now wants to keep out of this country. The studio erupted. Applause, gasps, laughter, disbelief, but Morgan raised a finger, signaling silence. "Here's my favorite part," he said. "The immigration petition that finally brought Thomas Leavitt into America was sponsored by an African-American businessman." And with that, the room fell absolutely still. "That's right," Morgan said. "Your family made it here because someone who looked like me believed in the American dream enough to help you." He turned back to Leavitt. "So when you tell me to go back, you're not just insulting me, you're insulting the very people who made your life in America possible." The studio had gone still again. Morgan Freeman stood unwavering, every eye fixed on him. "That's right," he said, his voice now firm, rising with calm power. "Karoline Leavitt's family was only able to come to America because an African-American immigrant vouched for them, helped them, lifted them." He turned to Leavitt, steady, unshaken. "When you told me to go back, you weren't just insulting me. You were telling the descendant of the very man who helped your family stay in this country to leave it." Even Leavitt's supporters couldn't hide it now. Some were shaking their heads, stunned by the weight of the irony. But Morgan wasn't done. "You want to talk about real Americans?" he said, now rising to his feet, commanding the room like a general stepping onto the battlefield. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. Real Americans don't judge others by their skin color or their last name or where their grandparents came from. They judge each other by character, by sacrifice, by what they give to this country. He turned to Leavitt. "Real Americans don't build careers by dividing people and feeding hate. They build legacies by standing for something greater than themselves." The room erupted. Applause, cheering. Even some CNN crew members were clapping. Morgan let it rise, then brought it back down with one sentence. "You want to know the difference between us, Miss Leavitt?" he said, his voice quiet but cutting through everything. "My family came here with nothing and gave everything to this country." He paused. "Your family came here with nothing and somehow taught their descendants to look down on others who did the same." The applause paused, then surged again. "I've spent my entire adult life serving in America, in uniform, in courtrooms, in places no one will ever know about. You've spent yours serving Donald Trump and your own ambition." Then softer, almost deadly. "So before you ever question anyone's loyalty to this country again, I suggest you look in the mirror and ask yourself, What have you done to make America better? He sat down, calm, composed. Then, almost as an afterthought, I believe you had a question about border security, Anderson. The studio exploded in a standing ovation. Anderson Cooper tried to continue, but he knew, and everyone else did too, that the debate was over. The conversation had changed. That night, the clip of Morgan's response shattered the internet. Morgan destroys Leavitt was the #1 trend worldwide. Commentators across the political spectrum, left and right, called it one of the most powerful political moments in a generation. But the real impact wasn't in the sound bites or memes. It was in the stories. Thousands of Americans sharing their family journeys, stories of sacrifice, of service, of becoming American by choice, not by accident of birth. Karoline Leavitt's campaign unraveled in days. Donors fled, staff quit. The New Hampshire Republican Party distanced itself. Her press conference fell flat. No one bought the excuses. The video said everything. Morgan Freeman, on the other hand, had become something bigger. He wasn't just a debate winner. He was now a symbol, a reminder of what American greatness really looks like. Quiet strength, earned respect, and absolute clarity of purpose. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't ranted. He had stood firm, told the truth, and let the facts speak for themselves. And in doing so, he reminded America of something it had almost forgotten. That what makes this country great isn't where you're from, it's what you're willing to stand for. Sometimes it takes a soldier's son to remind us what we should never forget. And that night, Morgan Freeman didn't just win a debate. He reminded America of who it was always meant to be.